just because you have a thought, it doesn't mean that it's true. And yet generally we assume that our thoughts are true, are truth. But really they are our truth. They're our interpretation of truth. So they have some bias and some self-preference, shall we say, in an egotistical way. And the thing is how we think, or what we choose to think, or what we choose to go with and roll with, defines our state of consciousness, how we live and how we see the world, what we get caught up in and what we don't get caught up in. And I think the point to get to is not to eradicate the mind of all thoughts, but is to see thoughts for what they are. Are they self-biased thoughts, programs, conditions, or are they common sense, analytical, adding up, just sensible things that are handy to do? And one way to distinguish between the thoughts that come into our awareness, because as you meditate and obviously as you contemplate, as you deepen your practice, the distance between your awareness or awareness itself and any thought increases. Or that is the other way around. You get wrapped up in the thought first, and then awareness kicks in and says, that was a thought. That was your personal thought or preconception of truth, of reality. So with these thoughts, one way of dealing with what comes in is to find the resolution of what comes in. If it has a use, then obviously you want to accept it and be with it and find the resolution and go with it. But if it's just a cyclical, I told you so, I knew she was like that, yeah, here we go again, maybe you need to let go of that kind of conditioning and that computer program that we all have in our brains to resolve that cyclical set of mental commentaries that just keep coming back. Patterns, we've all had them, or we all have them, and it's okay. But recognizing those patterns could be being critical, being assuming somebody we know or love is going to act in a certain way and not giving them the opportunity to be themselves, which again, we're really not giving the opportunity to be ourselves too, because we're just restricting the whole energy and dimension of consciousness, because we've already predetermined what the truth is, which is, as we know, distorted and self-orientated, shall we say. Based on all my rubbish, I'm going to assume that you are like this, you're going to say that. So probably best to come to the resolution of the thought that comes in. And that resolution is a practice of letting go. It's a simple practice, but it takes perseverance, effort, and continuing practice to just keep letting go, to keep coming back to a space of awareness, to presence, to a canvas of consciousness rather than a painting that you've already decided. I sometimes have used it like that, like a whiteboard, you know, where you, I don't know, you have a thought that comes in and you recognize it as cyclical, as something that is self-orientated and predetermining what's going to happen. So maybe I'll write that up on the whiteboard of my mind, as it were, in a visualization, and I'll just rub it out. If it's not serving you or anybody else, what's the point? Because if it's not serving you and anyone else, it's inevitably leading to fear and suffering and detracting from the present moment. And the thing is, if you just fight it and don't let it go, you know, if you take the physical route and the mental route of fighting it, you won't win. And you're just fighting yourself. And you fight it because you feel separate and you feel lacking. And of course, you're not separate and you're not lacking. Doesn't matter what you are, what you do. You don't lack anything. You just think you do, maybe. And the bizarre thing about all this stuff is that in some paradoxical way, whatever you think is missing is already here. In real terms. I'm not talking about the Aston Martin on the drive. I'm talking about your own self-worth, your own wholeness, your own being. And that's what this work is all about. So the point of that, resolving those thoughts and working on that mental commentary, is to come to a point not of no thought, but that thoughts become secondary. Awareness, pure consciousness, whatever words you want to call the essential reality, is then going with or not going with what comes in. So I might look out the window and say, oh, look at that lovely tree. I'll go with that, it's a lovely tree. But I might wake up one morning, it's peeing with rain, and think, oh dear, it's raining. Oh, wow. How terribly depressing, and oh dear, isn't it awful? Now I wake up and think, it's okay, it's raining. Well, we've got to have rain, we've got to have sun, we've got to have wind, we've got to have all these different things, they're all part of nature, like us. We're not on this kind of monotone kind of frequency. Well, at least I'm not. You're just on this frequency of absolute or absoluteness because you're a human being. So there's movement in consciousness, there's this wave and it flows. So what we're trying to get to is to the flow. Because there is a flow to life, to the universe, to consciousness. And when you give up the idea that you can control that, you enter a place that allows you to express yourself wholly and meaningfully in your own way. So it's kind of paradoxical because, excuse me, there's this inseparable one life, and yet there's the paradox of the appearance of the individual. And they're both, in a way, true in different dimensions of being. And it's possible to go from one extreme to the other, from, you know, the absolute egoic sociopathic state that some people seem to be in, mentioning no names, in the world today, to the absolute, to a state where you dissolve into the oneness of life, which is great, but may not be your greatest contribution to life, or it might be. But nevertheless, there is a place where all those elements we consider beyond us, such as God, spirit, consciousness, Buddha, Christ, all those things are one, including you. So there is a point in consciousness where there is no you, there is no God. In some strange way, there is no non-God, there is just one thing which is really indescribable, even though we're trying to talk about it to some degree. And the best way, say, I can describe that is this flow. There's a flow, you come into a flow, because the flow is not decided by your egoic tendencies, it's decided by life. And that is the benefit of it. You don't need to have payment or rewards for it. You don't even need to have validation from other people. You just know there's a place in consciousness you're at which is serving, compassionate, and true to you and to life. And really, we're all capable of being that because it's our nature. And yet we all have obstacles, or have had obstacles, or maybe have less obstacles. But we're in charge of those obstacles. If we know there are obstacles, we are the ones that can resolve them. We are the ones that can take them away. In fact, we're the ones that are keeping them there. So there's some kind of choice to consciousness and to suffering at some point, perhaps. It's worth looking at. And this flow, I was thinking about it the other day. Somebody, where I work in this care home as a volunteer a couple of days a week, and somebody was saying about the difficulty of going to sleep. Really simple, isn't it? Since childhood, probably everybody's had the experience of trying to get to sleep. Seems ridiculous to try to get to sleep. When your body's tired, you'll go to sleep, unless your mind's rampant with trying to get to sleep, in which case you won't get to sleep because you're trying to get to sleep. So trying to go to sleep really requires you to let go and go to sleep. And it's really the same with consciousness and the essential consciousness that we're talking about, or the root of consciousness and the self and realization and all these kind of things. Just let it be, let it rise, let yourself go. Put yourself to one side. You're not in control anyway. You might think you are. And the greatest contribution we can all give is to step aside and get into that flow. And that's why I call natural being. It's that simple. Simply being here. without, you say without a plan, it's almost without a plan. It's without expectation of, if I do that, I'm going to get this. That's gone. It's not if I do that, this is what I should do. It's a feeling. It's like the breath. You're just following this flow. And like the breathing, you think about it, or don't think about it, or think about it deeply, contemplate it. Are you choosing to breathe in this moment? Now you might be thinking about it because I've said it, but in the last 10 minutes or so, have you been thinking about your breath? No, of course you haven't, because it's an automatic action. But maybe there's more to it than that. It's an automatic action. It's natural. Nature has given you breath. And this brings the question to mind is, who is breathing? Who is breathing? And maybe you'll come up with, well, I'm breathing, it's my body and I'm doing it. Or maybe you'll come up with, life is breathing me. I don't think about it. My body's intelligence, as it were, from a scientific perspective, is what's doing it. But then isn't the body just an instrument for that which is doing, the being that is doing? And I think if we think of it that way, life is breathing me. That's the point we get to with consciousness when we come into this flow that I'm talking about. The Tao, the Wu Wei, all these kind of things, the self in Hinduism. It's not so far away as we presume it to be. In fact, it's impossible for us to be separate from it. We are just layering filters over it. And the most dense is, of course, the physical appearance of a person. And then the layers become finer and finer. So same with the brain. Maybe the brain's just an instrument. Like breathing, and the lungs are an instrument. Or the lungs are the instruments for breathing. The brain is the instrument for thought, analysis, consciousness. That doesn't mean it is the essence of consciousness. Very unlikely, because obviously it's a physical form. So it's obviously, to me anyway, I shouldn't say obviously, but it appears to be a denser form of consciousness and an instrument for thought. And likewise, when you're seeing, it's not your eyes that are seeing, it's not your brain that's seeing, it's awareness that's seeing, it's consciousness itself that's seeing. So let go of the personal, my eyes. I don't know about you, my eyes are awful, my ears are awful, but it's all still here. But then behind all that is the one awareness that we all share. Even though we might individualize it and appropriate it for ourselves with these filters that we place over it. Rather like, if you can imagine, like a clear light, like a clear bulb, And we put kind of coloured filters over it, red and yellow and green and blue, and they're all different emotions and different patterns and traumas and baggage. So we're really the ones, we're the only ones that can remove those filters back to the relationship of essential relationship with awareness. And when you reach that point, when you reach, let's say, pointless point of awareness, suddenly all your stories and all the past and future and everything, it has very little importance, because there's a flow. When you contemplate what's going on, where have I gone? Where is me? Well, of course, you're still there, but there's a flow going on that you are in. Again, in the Tao, I think the Lao Tzu calls it, refers to it as a different streams. There are different streams all leading to the one ocean, which makes very good sense of how it is. And it's funny, when you're in the ego, you're fighting to go upstream. I'm going to get to where? I'm going to get to my own little pool, and and everybody will know that I've got there, like a salmon or a trout, struggling to get upstream. And then when that bit's done, the fish comes back downstream into the flow, into the ocean. And I think the fish must go, oh, thank God for that. Must be quite relieved. And I think there's a great relief in this flow that I'm talking about, and that's why it's natural to want to share it and to express it and to be of service in some way that is within one's capabilities as best one can. So imagine yourself, where are you? I think if you're here, you've seen the error of eternally going upstream, and you're coming downstream. And maybe you're in the ocean, and maybe you've been to the ocean or touched the ocean. I thought, oh, but hold on, I'm not quite ready. But that ocean of existence itself knows exactly what to do, like it did or it does with your breath, like it does with your thought if you allow it, like it does with your consciousness if you allow it. If you just let go and trust in the truth of life, that doesn't belong to one person, it's life, it's complete and whole. So in some ways, it's not a philosophy. If you let go and go with it, the most remarkable things happen. And you can apply will in relationship with that, but of course the will has now got a more of a universal sense, it's got a more of a cooperative and interwoven nature. So flowing with life has got to be the present moment that we are looking for, or we are in. And because it's flowing and you're in the stream or you're in the ocean, you're going towards the ocean. If you just be quiet and go with it, it is effortless. And when something's effortless, it can have great value because it comes from a deeper place within us. And I think that's a natural spiritual manifestation, if you like, to express something from deeper within us that connects us all. And of course, we might be flowing some of the time, and then be brought out of that stream, or be brought to the side of the stream, as it were, and be clinging to the side of the riverbank or whatever way you want to look at it. Because we're very busy, or this problem's come up again, and we come out of the flow. So those recycled conditions and patterns and emotions and all that stuff we were talking about before is what takes us out of the flow. It's more work to be out of the flow than it is in the flow. It's so much more. Because if I'm clinging to the side of the riverbank. Oh no, I'm very busy, and so look at me, and it's terrible. Or I'm lost in the sadness of the world. The same thing can happen. You know, your heart explodes when you see things on the news because you realize you can't help in a physical or financial way. And that takes you out of the flow. So all we do is this. Let go. And here we go. We're back in the flow. Just let go. And you're back in the flow because you are in the flow in this very moment. Unless you choose not to be. And you'll feel it physically, mentally, emotionally, if you're in the flow or not. If you're not in the flow, there'll be a tightness, a weight, a grasping to the side of the bank of the river or stream or on a stone. You're just holding on to something that you can't possibly change. So let go. Choose to let go. The greatest service you can give to resolving all those problems for yourself and others is to let go. And it's the easiest route. And yet we think, well, it must be more complicated than that. Must be more different. This must be, yeah. Is it? The thing that shocked me is that we create our own separation between the ideals that we have and our own identity. So now all those names of things and people, they don't have the same resonance because I realize that they're one thing. Because as I said before, you can be in a place of consciousness in the absolute, if you want to call it that, in a universal place where God and you are the same thing. But of course, you didn't create anything if there's a creator. Or did you? And that's going back to this, the surprises of it, is that letting go of what you think you have leads you to the freedom of everything. It's a very strange anti-material kind of way it works. I've got this much cheese and I give you that much cheese without charging you. And yet I have less cheese, but I feel wealthier. I feel like I've got more cheese. But, so that's about the giving away and the receiving. The authentic giving rewards you tenfold. I'm not talking about the evangelistic, give me $50 now and you'll be a millionaire next year and all this rubbish, absolute rubbish. What's been taken there is a philosophy or a truth, actually a spiritual truth, that by giving of yourself, you receive tenfold. But you can't show anybody a statement. It's just a knowing of reward that is unquantifiable in some strange way. And that's another indicator that you're in the flow, I think. Another one I just thought of being in the flow is we talked about the density of the body and the weight. You know, when as we get older and things are a bit achy or knees not working or whatever it is, eyes are fading, blah, blah, blah. The body feels so heavy when you're not in the flow because you're clinging to the bank. And you can really feel the weight of everything you are, physical, mental, and emotional, when you're clinging to the bank. And you can feel it going for a walk or just going about your daily routine. When you are far from the flow, or when you are clinging to the side of the riverbank, you are heavy. And you're heavy physically, and you're heavy mentally, and you're heavy emotionally. You're probably quite heavy to be around, you know. And it's the same for all of us. It's not like some people. Everybody's got that capacity to be light and in the flow, or to be heavy and clinging. So again, when you're in the flow, you're almost weightless. I think that's quite a good way of describing it. And this effortless, because you're not carried by your will and your desire and your story. You're just carried by the flow of life. And the flow of life is very clever in a simple and powerful way. It knows what to do and it knows where to go. And all you need to do is let go. And of course, that letting go comes from realizing that you're clinging. So you must facilitate yourself to be in the flow by letting go, by not clinging to the side of the riverbank. Go with the stream, go with the flow, go down to the ocean, and you'll find you're taken to wherever you need to be. But it's not like sort of being washed up on a desert island. It's about being in purpose and meaning in a full and whole way. It's not go with the flow, just go with the flow. No, it's not about that in a social sense and with your peers and your friends. I'll just go along with everybody else. No, they're all clinging to the bank. Maybe they're having a picnic, I don't know. It seems to me that, the people that really want to resolve their own suffering and resolve other people's suffering will let go and get in the flow, because they realize that they alone cannot do what's required in the world today. So know when you're clinging, know when you're holding on. We know what element of the psyche that is. That's the ego. We're not destroying the ego, we're just putting it in its place. We're integrating it into the flow of life. Don't need to be perfect. We are just the imperfect flowing with the perfection of life. And that kind of concept keeps a humility to the whole thing. So know when you're holding on, know when you're not letting go into the oneness of life. And that will serve you and others. And that's really about all I've got to say on it.